Last time we talked about reasons people leave faith as highlighted by Jesus and others. Of course, the amount of reasons could be even more numerous than these we mention. But this time I want to talk about 8 reasons I've encountered when people leave the faith community. I'm not proposing much in the way of responses to these issues. I just want to say that if you fall into these categories, you are not alone. And to those who remain within the faith community, let's be those who listen deeply to the pain in each of these descriptions. My name's Jools. This is Dchurched.com. Welcome. These reasons for walking away are, of course, not neat, any more than life is neat. They tumble into one another and overlap, but I've attempted to delineate between them for the sake of clarity. So let's go with this. The first reason I notice in terms of walking away from the faith community is this one. Number 1, no matter how hard I try, it just doesn't seem true anymore. It just doesn't seem plausible. I could name any number of people who came to this conclusion. Here's a long quote from someone with this perspective. For me, I left the church because I stopped believing any of it was true. I had lots of questions, but I didn't want to give up on faith just because I had questions. I certainly didn't walk away from church because God didn't give me something that I wanted or something like that. I walked away because a variety of things got me asking questions. And asking honest questions is fatal to faith. When I speak with others who have left Christianity, the reason is always that they investigated it and found it wasn't true. The quote goes on. They read the Bible. That's enough to make an atheist out of anyone. They saw the fruit of the church in the form of the American fascist dictator Donald Trump, and they realized if the tree is bearing bad fruit, it's not a good tree. End of quote. Interesting, he quotes the Bible at the end there. For some, it feels though that the plausibility structure just doesn't work for them anymore. The faith seems implausible in a way it didn't do 1, 2, 5, 10 years ago. Perhaps they see themselves as maturing out of it or place the stories in the category of Santa Claus, something they once believed, but now see it as childish or something they have graduated beyond. They may be sad they can no longer believe, perhaps wistful and nostalgic for a more certain time in life. Sociologist George Santayana said this, "I don't reject you or your faith, I just wish it a fond farewell." Marginally patronizing, but okay. But I've known a number of friends in this kind of category. Just doesn't seem true anymore. That's number 1. Number 2, I was fed up with fundamentalist, uncritical confirmation bias. This is a lethal combination if you've experienced it. Firstly, fundamentalist thinking. Typically, this way of framing the world sees everything only in binary terms: good, evil, black, white, right and wrong. Sooner or later, mature adults come to realize that life really isn't that simple. In fact, to think we fully know the division between good and evil that God will make at the end of time is to arrogantly claim more than is within human capacity. So that's fundamentalist thinking. Secondly, confirmation bias. This is the tendency to interpret new evidence as a confirmation of what you already believe, your core existing beliefs or theories. But as soon as a young Christian experiences the wider world or alternative worldviews or goes to university, things change. They may begin to realize how the Christian faith of their experience fails to engage with the critical questions of the wider world, the questions of the age. Openness to alternate ways of seeing things is not a strength of a fundamentalist mindset, to say the least. And if you've experienced that uncritical, fundamentalist mindset, you can end up feeling like you've been shortchanged by a worldview that is no longer fit for purpose. And the alternative for many seems to be to head for the exit door. So that's the second of the things that I've experienced in terms of people's reasons for moving on. Third reason, I was fed up with a selective hyper-skepticism of science. Very often there seems to be a couple of ideas that go together: a literal approach to the early chapters of Genesis and climate change denialism. The thinking goes like this: if we can't trust the scientists on evolution, why would we trust them on climate change? And yet this skepticism is incredibly selective. We trust the science to keep our planes in the air, the laws of aerodynamics, or our feet on the ground, the law of gravity, but we can't cope with the crisis of our age. To quote a former political leader, it is truly an inconvenient truth. We may or may not listen to the scientists when a global pandemic sweeps across the planet, but the inconvenience of adjusting to climate catastrophe, well, not so much. We don't adjust. And we act skeptically. Now, again and again, I have come across a weariness from former Christians at the inability of some communities of faith, not all, but some communities of faith, to accept the realities of multiple disciplines of science that say our planet is in trouble. One person who I respect argued like this: after all, hasn't God said to Noah that the seasons will never end? Therefore, climate change can't be true. This is breathtaking exegesis. In fact, for an atheist scientist friend of mine, this skepticism is a barrier to faith for him. Why? Well, simply because it seems to deny the validity of his profession. This failure on the part of communities of faith to listen to those who study God's other book, the created order, to have our own biases and to close our ears to what they are saying, is a massive turn-off for some. It seems that God may well speak through his creation, just not through those people who spend their lives studying what it's saying, which is bizarre. For some, it is a reason that they eventually walk out of the church door, and the responsibility for that lies squarely at the feet of those who put their fingers in their ears when multiple disciplines of the scientific community speak with one voice. So that's another reason I've come across quite frequently, actually, a selective hyper-skepticism of science. People are walking out the door because of what many within faith communities are saying in regard to climate change. Fourth reason that I've come across: I was fed up with unaccountable and immature leaders. Maybe you've come across the church leader with an ego the size of Texas and all the humility of the most boastful narcissist you've ever come across. But often it's more subtle than that. Leaders often have charisma and charm, and only gradually do you notice the power games, the manipulations that leave a sour taste in your mouth and a woundedness in your soul. For a number of ex-Christians I've known, this has been a key factor in them moving on. It can be incredibly wounding when the shepherd beats up on the sheep. Those who remain within the fold would do well to keep their counsel when it comes to thinking they understand the pain of such wounded souls. Next time we'll be talking a little bit more about these reasons people walk away. This is Dchurched.com. My name's Jools. Thanks for listening.